The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the fields, as if the land itself was drawing a deep breath. Out here time seemed to stand still, the quiet broken only by the distant calls of birds settling in for the night. Everything seemed peaceful until it wasn't. The air grew thick with tension as a storm brewed on the horizon, but it was more than just thunderclouds that would soon disrupt the calm. There was a whiff of danger, something heavy hanging in the air like the promise of a sudden downpour. In the middle of this tranquil landscape stood a modest wooden farmhouse, paint peeling, yet sturdy as the earth below. This farm was home to Frank, a seasoned farmer with hands hardened by years spent sowing seeds and reaping the fruits of labor. But those hands had another talent, knowing how to protect what was his. On that fateful day, as Frank leaned on the porch railing, watching the sun dip behind the hills, he felt it. That primal instinct, honed by years of living a life intertwined with the land and its rhythms, ignited within him. Something was off. A rustling sound, faint yet insistent, caught his attention. His heart began to race as he focused. There it was again, a rustle from the direction of the barn. With determined steps, Frank made his way across the yard, the gravel crunching under his boots. His mind raced through possibilities, the weight of the day's chores forgotten. As he approached the barn, he squinted into the gathering gloom. The shadows danced and deepened, twisting into figures that didn't belong. Suddenly, a flash of movement sliced through the air. 3 figures darted from behind the barn, clad in dark clothing, faces obscured by balaclavas. Frank's heart pounded. These were not the kind of visitors a farmer welcomed. Adrenaline surged through him. He may not have been a soldier, but he had learned plenty about survival. The land's whispers had taught him well. He shouted, his voice cutting through the thickening night. The intruders froze, caught off guard. For a split second, the world seemed suspended in time. But then chaos erupted. They charged towards him, intent on getting into the house behind him. Frank felt fear and fury collide within him. He sprang into action, racing back towards the house, heart hammering in his chest. His home was more than wood and nails. It was his sanctuary, the culmination of a lifetime. With each step, he recalled his father's teachings, lessons from a time when neighbors stood together against threats far greater than mere intruders. Rushing inside, Frank knew he had to act fast. He scanned the room, taking in the family photograph and the homely clutter that defined his life. His gaze landed on a sturdy iron rod propped against the wall, a remnant of last summer's fence repairs. It would have to do. Gripping it in his hands, he felt a surge of confidence. Whatever they wanted, he wasn't going to let them take it. As he returned to the front door, the intruders were closing in. The first one reached out, trying to shove the door open, but Frank was ready. With one powerful swing, he swung the rod against the door, catching the man off guard and sending him sprawling back. Frank shouted, his heart still racing but his resolve firm. The other 2 paused, exchanging glances. A flicker of uncertainty crossed their faces, but it was quickly replaced by a reckless aggression. They charged in unison, but this time Frank was prepared. Swinging the iron rod, he struck one of them squarely in the midsection. The intruder gasped, stumbling back, while the other rushed in just close enough to get a fistful of Frank's shirt. But Frank was no stranger to tough situations. Years of working the fields had given him a power and determination that belied his age. He pivoted, using his weight to throw off the attacker, twisting around to land a blow against their side. With the element of surprise on his side, he swung the rod again, both as a weapon and as a shield. The scuffle was raw and chaotic. Frank felt a surge of primal energy. Each swing of his makeshift weapon was fueled by more than just self-defense. It was driven by a deep connection to the land, to his family, to everything he loved. Yet there was no time for complacency. One of the intruders recovered, lunging for the door. They were trying to make a break for it, perhaps to regroup outside. But Frank had made up his mind. He wouldn't let it happen. With a single, swift movement, he barred the door with his shoulder, slamming it shut as the second intruder grappled with him. This was a fight for his life. The adrenaline coursed through him like fire, and with raw instinct Frank pushed, shoving the second intruder back against the wall. Shouts of surprise echoed in the cramped space, breaks in the shadows brightened by flashes of flooding moonlight. Outside, the storm that had been brewing finally unleashed its fury, rain battering against the roof like a drum. But out here, it was a different kind of tempest. Then came the crack of thunder, and in that moment, clarity washed over him. The spirits of all the generations that had come before him seemed to rise from the very earth beneath his feet. With each breath, Frank felt the dusty legacy of his forebearers push him forward. He couldn't predict the outcome, but he could shape it. With one hard shove, Frank sent the second intruder crashing into the nearest table, the thud echoing through the cautious quiet of the house. For a second, it was almost too easy, almost like the intruders didn't believe they could lose. They hadn't realized who they were messing with. Just then, a loud crack of the doorframe splintered the thickness of the air. The first intruder mustered up the last of his courage, lunging at Frank with a wild swing. Instinct kicked in and Frank ducked low, feeling wind whip through his hair as he moved. He could hear the intruder's breath quickening, panic fueling their reckless energy. Frank planted his feet firmly, the ground beneath him feeling like an anchor. When he straightened and turned sharply, he grabbed a nearby chair, thrusting it forward. Wood splintered against flesh, and for a moment it seemed as if the chaos had ebbed. But as the adrenaline surged in his veins, the other two intruders rejoined the fight, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. They charged him from both sides this time, a dance of desperation played with wild energy. Frank felt his heart beat faster, pain shot through his sides, reminding him that he was not invincible. Yet the fire within him blazed brighter. He grabbed the iron rod again, swinging it with fierce determination, catching one of them just beneath the chin. The sound of a body hitting the ground echoed through the house. The other intruder hesitated, and in that moment Frank seized the opportunity. He charged forward, all fury and focus, swinging the rod like an extension of himself. The intruder stumbled back towards the door, glancing behind him and then at Frank, his bravado fading quickly in the face of resolve. The intruder shouted, palms raised in desperation. "We were just trying to," but Frank interrupted. "You wanted to invade my home." His voice boomed over the chaos, a powerful proclamation belying any notion of weakness. For a moment, it felt as if the world outside had paused, nature itself holding its breath. The weight of those words lingered in the air between them. Unflinching, Frank stood his ground, feeling the strength in his heart steady. With one last look in their eyes, the remaining intruder bolted for the door, dragging their fallen friend with him. Adrenaline still coursing through him, Frank let out a mighty roar, a primal sound that echoed across the fields. The storm raged outside, but for Frank, it was nothing compared to the tempest within him. As the door swung shut and the shadows disappeared into the night, he could feel the tension unraveling, like a tightly coiled spring finally released. In the silence that followed, broken only by the haunting sound of the rain, Frank let out a shaky breath. He leaned against the door, feeling the pulse of the house beneath him. It felt as if the walls were alive, breathing with a shared rhythm of courage. He watched as the shadows retreated and the storm raged on, realizing that his victory wasn't just against the intruders who dared to invade his home. It was a stand against fear and uncertainty. With the storm thundering outside, Frank felt a sense of peace settle within him. The land, much like his spirit, was untouched, just as it always had been. As he looked out into the night, he could feel that primal connection to everything around him, the earth, the wind, the heritage of farmers who had come before him. And in that moment he knew they'd never take that away. Frank smiled faintly, feeling the weight of the day finally settle. The sun would rise again, bringing a new day, another chance to cultivate the land and protect what was his. And he'd be ready, always ready for whatever came next. The heavy summer air hung thick and warm over the fields, and the sunset cast an otherworldly glow on the rows of corn that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was a picturesque scene, the kind that would make anyone sigh in contentment, but within the beauty, darkness brewed. Not of a passing storm, but of a different kind, the kind that could turn tranquility into chaos. Jacob, a seasoned farmer with hands calloused from years of toil, stood on his porch, resting his eyes on the horizon. Sweat dripped down his brow, and the light breeze felt like a gentle embrace against his skin. He had spent the day planting, nurturing and watching over his land, the land his family had tended for generations. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, something shifted in the atmosphere, and an unsettling feeling crept up his spine. He could hear it, the faint rustle of movement in the tall grass just beyond the reach of his dim porch light. At first he dismissed it, telling himself it was just the wind playing tricks, but that nagging intuition wouldn't let him go. Jacob had learned to trust that feeling. It had saved him more than once. The night deepened, painting everything in shadows. A chill settled upon the farm, and with it came an urgency that he couldn't shake. He stepped off the porch, the wooden boards creaking beneath his weight, the cool grass surprising against his bare feet. Something was wrong, he could feel it in his bones. Suddenly, out of the darkness, 3 figures emerged, cloaked in black, their faces hidden beneath masks. They moved with a swift, coordinated grace that sent a jolt of adrenaline coursing through Jacob's veins. They were too close, too fast. This wasn't a break-in, it was an outright invasion. Jacob's voice boomed through the night, firm and unyielding. The intruders froze for a moment, taken aback by the unexpected confrontation. Then, regaining their composure, they advanced toward him, eyes glinting with malicious intent. Jacob knew he had to act, not just to protect his home, but to protect everything he held dear. His instincts kicked in. He had been preparing for this moment for years, but he never imagined it would actually happen. He turned and bolted back toward the house, the adrenaline propelling him forward. Inside, he quickly scanned the room, searching for anything he could use. His gaze landed on a heavy iron crowbar propped against the wall, a tool meant for fixing fences but now destined for a much different purpose. Jacob grabbed it, feeling its weight in his hands. This was no ordinary tool, it was a lifeline. As he turned back toward the door, the shadows had begun to invade his home. One figure slipped inside just as Jacob slammed the door shut, catching a glimpse of the intruder's eyes swirling with surprise and determination. Jacob braced his back against the solid wood, heart pounding, waiting for the inevitable clash. The intruder pounded against the door, urgency fueling their fury. Jacob felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. All those years of hard work, of sweat and grit, were at stake. This wasn't just about the house. It was his family legacy, the very essence of who he was. Jacob shouted, pushing back with all his might. With a sudden crash, the door burst open and chaos erupted. The first intruder lunged at him, a fist swinging wildly, but Jacob sidestepped, using the momentum to swing the crowbar down hard. The dull thud of metal against bone sent shockwaves through the room, but he couldn't dwell on it. There were 2 more to contend with. Breath quickening, Jacob turned to face the second intruder, whose eyes reflected desperation and anger. Jacob hadn't signed up for this. He was just a farmer, a provider, a keeper of the land. Yet here he was, fighting for more than just survival. He was fighting for every seed he had sown, every dream he had ever nurtured. A flurry of arms and legs ensued, bodies crashing against furniture as Jacob danced between instinct and resolve. Each swing of the crowbar became a testament to his determination. He had not been raised to back down and would not be cowed by the odds stacked against him. Suddenly, the third intruder, who had been lurking at the edge of the scuffle, charged forward like a raging bull. Jacob barely had time to react. The impact sent him stumbling back, crashing into a table. He gasped for air, momentarily dazed, the world spinning around him. But deep inside, a flame flickered. A deep-rooted instinct awakened, the drive to protect everything that mattered. With a fierce roar, Jacob pushed himself up, eyes blazing. His home, his sanctuary, would not fall that night. He stood once more, the crowbar gripped tightly in his hands, fueled by a mix of fear and fierce love. The intruders hesitated, and in that moment of uncertainty, Jacob saw his chance. He lunged forward, driving the iron bar toward the first intruder, catching them off guard. The sound of grunts filled the air as all 3 attempted to regroup, fueled by a mix of anger and desperation. The shadows in the room flickered as the rain began to pound against the roof, each drop matching the intensity of the altercation within. Jacob's heart raced in sync with the thunder, his thoughts spiraling between panic and clarity. It was as if an unseen force of nature had joined the fight, a reminder that chaos often precedes revelation. With every swing, every shove, a part of Jacob reminded him of his ancestors, those who had tilled the land before him. They had faced storms far fiercer than this. They understood what it meant to take a stand, to fight for what was rightfully theirs. This was his moment to honor that legacy. As he turned to face the second intruder, their eyes wide with fear, Jacob charged forward, swinging the crowbar with renewed determination. The blow found its mark, sending the intruder crashing against the wall, a stunned look frozen on their face. Two down, but the third would not back down. Instead, they lunged, desperation oozing from every pore. Jacob felt the rush of impending impact, but in that wild moment he calculated his move. He sidestepped, feeling the rush of air as the intruder barreled past him, crashing to the floor in a heap. Breathless, Jacob paused to catch his breath. The once chaotic scene was now heavy with silence, broken only by the sound of rain beating against the house. Outside, nature's fury raged on, but within those walls a different kind of storm had brewed, and he was its eye. He stood still, listening for any sign of movement, and then he heard it. The sound of footsteps retreating, the slow realization that their plans had unraveled. The remaining intruders had fled into the night, abandoning their mission. Relief washed over him in waves, mixed with a surge of pride. He surveyed the room, taking in the havoc that had unfolded. The table lay in disarray, remnants of the struggle scattered about, but it was a mess that he would gladly take. He had fought back with the ferocity of a lion protecting its den. As the adrenaline began to fade, the weight of what had just happened settled into his bones. Jacob leaned against the doorframe, panting, the crowbar still gripped tightly in his hand. His heart slowed, but the echo of that primal battle would resonate within him forever. The dawn crept in softly, a tender golden light that filtered through the broken windows, whispering promises of a new beginning. Jacob allowed himself to take a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm settle over the land. He had defended his home, but more so, he had reaffirmed his identity as a protector, a warrior of the farm. In the days that followed, whispers traveled through the small community that surrounded his farm. Jacob had become a legend, not just as a farmer who tilled the earth, but as a man who stood tall against adversity. His story resonated deeply, planting seeds of courage in the hearts of those who heard it. People began to visit him, seeking wisdom and banter, sharing their own fears and dreams. They knew he had faced darkness and emerged unscathed, stronger than ever. Months passed and life returned to normal. The scars of the encounter faded, but the lessons remained imprinted in Jacob's heart. He knew, deep down, that he had emerged not just as a farmer, but as a guardian, a testament to what it means to fight for one's legacy. Under the same sky that had once witnessed his struggle, he returned to the fields every day, planting, nurturing, and growing. The earth, much like Jacob himself, thrived in resilience, and he walked among the crops with a steadfast spirit. The sun set each evening in a blaze of color, but it was the echoes of the storm long gone that danced in his mind. With each passing day, Jacob felt the pull of the land, the whispers of his ancestors, and he embraced that feeling, knowing that whatever storms lay ahead, he would always be ready. The sun was setting over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and crimson, when Dave felt the first stirrings of unease. The soft whispers of the wind through the tall corn stalks should have been calming, but instead they raised the hairs on his neck. Instinctively, he scanned the fields surrounding his small farmhouse, the place he poured his heart and soul into nurturing for years. Every inch of it was sacred to him, the land, the crops, and the memories that lingered in the breeze. But on that evening, something felt dangerously off. As a veteran farmer, Dave had learned to trust his gut. It was the same instinct that kept him one step ahead of storms and pests alike. Tonight, however, it wasn't nature that sent warning signals, it was something darker. The rustling turned into movement, shadows weaving between the rows of corn. A chill raced down his spine. He squinted, trying to make out the figures slipping through the stalks. At first it seemed like a trick of the fading light, but as the shapes drew closer, the unsettling truth settled in. They weren't mere shadows of the night, they were intruders. 3 figures, clad in dark clothing and masks, slipped silently toward the farmhouse, their intentions grim. Dave's heart pounded in his chest, each beat a reminder of everything he had built here. The long days spent tilling the soil, planting seeds of hope, and watching them grow into a bountiful harvest. They wanted to take that away, and he wasn't about to let it happen. His hands gripped the porch railing tighter, knuckles whitening. He had learned the art of protection not just in the fields, but from the life he had led. It was a fight-or-flight moment, and for Dave, retreating was not an option. His voice boomed across the stillness, cutting through the hum of the night. The intruders froze, eyes wide beneath their masks, caught off guard by his sudden appearance. Just a moment before, they had crept toward the house, fueled by the adrenaline of their plan, unaware of the resolve of the man they were about to confront. For a fleeting second, hesitation flitted among them. They were not expecting confrontation. But then, regaining their composure, they surged forward like wolves hungry for prey. Dave's heart raced. Time had slowed down, and every moment stretched, revealing the primal dance of predator and prey. He turned and bolted for the door, urgency propelling him forward. The familiar wood felt sturdy beneath his fingers, and he slammed it shut behind him, locking it in one swift motion. Breathing heavily, he scanned the room, searching for anything that could be wielded as a weapon. His eyes landed on a rusted pitchfork propped against the wall, a relic from summers past but still sharp and reliable. With a sense of purpose igniting within him, he took the pitchfork in hand. It felt heavy but reassuring. This was more than a tool for farming, it would become an extension of his will to protect. The pounding on the door grew louder, fists slamming against solid wood, the sound echoed eerily in the empty space. A voice shouted from the other side, rough and demanding. But Dave was no coward, and he was no stranger to darkness. He advanced toward the door, taking a deep breath, feeling the strength of the earth beneath him. He yelled back, his voice booming with resolve. Then with a sudden crash, the door burst open, the force sending a shockwave through the room. The first intruder stumbled inside, their eyes wild with determination. Dave didn't hesitate. With a quick thrust of the pitchfork, he lunged forward, aiming for the intruder's midsection. The sharp blade connected with a grunt, sending the attacker reeling back. But there were two more, and they were fast on their heels. They surged inside, a chaotic burst of energy fueled by desperation and greed. Even in the thick of the chaos, Dave found the clarity to calculate his moves. Years in the fields had trained him for both the routine and the unexpected, for storms that might come when he least expected them. Each swing of the pitchfork was deliberate, fueled by an instinct to protect, every thrust driven by his determination to defend his home. One intruder came at him from the left, swinging a fist that narrowly missed Dave's face. He pivoted quickly, using the pitchfork to deflect the blow and jab toward his attacker. The metal found its mark, causing the intruder to stagger back. All around him, furniture toppled as the climate of the room turned tense and primal. The second intruder grabbed the nearest object, a chair, and hurled it in Dave's direction. He ducked just in time, the chair smashing against the wall behind him, splintering into pieces that echoed through the now chaotic space. The third intruder was closing in fast, eyes ablaze with wild energy. Dave felt a surge of adrenaline, clarity cutting through the noise. He had fought battles before, not just against storms but against doubt and despair. Every time the earth had been unkind, he had risen. He shouted, infusing everything he had into those words. The pitchfork sliced through the air as he swung it low, aiming for the legs of the last intruder. The blow landed hard, and with a cry, they fell to the floor. But just as he thought he had the upper hand, the first intruder lunged again, catching him off guard. A fist connected with his side, pain shooting through him. It was a brutal reminder that even in his resolve, he was still flesh and blood. Energy waning, he felt the pressure rising, his breath growing shallow. Time seemed to extend again. The room swirled around him, adrenaline coursing through his veins as he fought to regain control. He couldn't back down. He wouldn't. With grit, he turned toward the intruder once more, the pitchfork feeling like an anchor, a connection to his land, his legacy. A crack of thunder echoed outside, a powerful reminder of nature's volatility mirroring the raw energy within. For a brief moment, fear and fury danced in tandem, but resilience surged forth as Dave steadied himself. With one final thrust, he aimed the pitchfork at the first intruder who was crouched and dazed. The metal tip connected once more, a piercing reminder of who truly owned this space. The force sent the intruder sprawling against the wall, a stunned look on their face, a blend of shock and defeat. Turning to face the remaining two, Dave's eyes burned with intensity. They hesitated now, fear creeping into their expression. The scuffle had shaken them, but his momentum would not falter. The second intruder charged again, but Dave pivoted, swinging the pitchfork low. The attack missed, and instead the intruder collided with their fallen comrade. The two tumbled to the floor, a tangle of limbs and panic. Without missing a beat, Dave closed in, adrenaline blurring the lines of pain and triumph. "Leave," he commanded, voice booming with authority. The pitchfork gleamed ominously in the dim light, a symbol of his unwavering determination to protect what was rightfully his. The remaining two scrambled to their feet, eyes darting between Dave and the door. In a moment of decision born of sheer survival instinct, they fled into the night, shadows retreating into the depths of darkness. Dave stood there, panting heavily, chest heaving as relief washed over him in waves. The farm was still standing, the land untouched, but the battle had left its mark. He leaned against the wall, the pitchfork slipping from his grip and clattering to the floor. The silence that followed was deafening. All he could hear was the pounding of the rain against the roof and the rapid beat of his own heart. Minutes felt like hours as he soaked in the reality of what had just transpired. It was more than a fight against trespassers. It was a fight for his identity, for the very essence of who he was rooted in the land. As dawn broke, casting a soft light into the farmhouse, Dave could still feel the sense of adrenaline coursing through his veins. It had been a harrowing experience, one he would not soon forget. In the days that followed, whispers of the confrontation spread through the small town. Neighbors came by, drawn in by the stories of courage and strength that surrounded him. They sought his wisdom, his experiences, and found hope in his resolve. Over cups of coffee on the porch, they shared their fears and stories, the community bound together by a fabric of shared struggles. Dave became a symbol of perseverance, a testament that even in the face of danger, courage lies within. He spoke of farming and nature's rhythms, of standing strong against challenges that arise, whether they came from the weather or from those with ill intentions. As months passed, life returned to a quiet rhythm on the farm. The cicadas sang their songs while the crops flourished under the sun. Yet on quiet nights when the wind swept across the land, Dave recalled the darkness. The memory of that confrontation lingered, serving as a reminder of the tangled dance between vulnerability and strength. Each day, he walked the rows of corn, feeling the soil beneath his hands, nurturing the life he had fought for. He realized that, like the crops, he too would grow stronger from the trials faced. The earth had a way of teaching lessons, not just patience but the importance of resilience. He understood that while the threat of invaders may have passed, life's battles would continue to ebb and flow, just like the seasons. With every breath of the land, he carried within him the spirit of a fighter, a protector who stood steadfast against whatever life might throw his way. His home remained a sanctuary, a place rooted in love and history. And as the sun dipped again below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the fields, Dave smiled knowingly. He was a farmer at heart, a guardian of his land, forever ready for whatever storms might come next. The moon hung high, a glowing sentinel in the night sky, casting its silver light over the quiet fields. The only sound that broke the stillness was the soft rustle of leaves dancing in the wind, a soothing melody that wrapped around the small farmhouse like a warm blanket. But inside that tranquil home, a storm was brewing, a storm of uncertainty, of tension that was heavy in the air. Tom, a seasoned farmer with decades of experience etched into the lines of his face, stood by the kitchen window. He had just finished a long day of work, the air still thick with the promise of rain. He wiped his hands on a faded towel, casting his gaze out into the expansive fields he had nurtured for years. But something nagged at him. The unease clung to him like sweat on a humid day. Suddenly, a sound broke the silence, soft at first, like the whisper of footsteps across the gravel path leading to his door. Tom's heart began to race. Instinct kicked in, sending a jolt of adrenaline through his veins. Years of working the land had sharpened his senses, and he wasn't going to let anything go unnoticed on his property. He stepped toward the door, going with that gut feeling that had served him well in the past. It was a simple two-story farmhouse, sturdy but aging, filled with memories of laughter and toil. The late-night peace was soon shattered by a louder sound. It was the unmistakable sound of a fist pounding on wood. Tom's heart dropped. He called out, his voice steady but full of authority. No response came, just another wave of insistent pounding against his door, this time accompanied by muffled shouts that sent a chill creeping up his spine. The figures outside became clearer as they shifted in the moonlight. 3 masked intruders were moving closer to the porch, their intentions dark and dangerous. Tom's instincts flared, urging him to take action. He dashed over to the kitchen counter, scanning for anything that could help him defend his home. His eyes landed on a rusted crowbar, forgotten behind stacks of old magazines. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. As he gripped it tightly in his hands, the reality of the situation thickened in the air. He could feel the weight of his family's legacy resting on his shoulders. This wasn't just a fight to protect his home, it was a fight for everything he held dear. Another hard bang echoed through the night. This time the door shuddered on its hinges. Tom rushed to the front room, adrenaline surging as he took his position near the door. He had spent countless hours sowing seeds and nurturing life, and he was damn sure he wasn't about to let anyone take it from him without a fight. He shouted, his voice booming as he raised the crowbar in front of him. The door splintered, and in that moment it felt like time had slowed. 3 figures burst into the room like a swarm of locusts driven by hunger. Their masks did little to hide the raw intent in their eyes. The lead intruder lunged at him, and without a second thought, Tom swung the crowbar. The dull thud of metal connecting with flesh echoed through the small home, the lead intruder crashing down onto the floor. For a moment, shock froze the other 2 in their tracks, and that brief hesitation gave Tom the chance he needed. He yelled, charging forward, pivoting to face the second intruder who was already recovering. The taste of fear mixed with the adrenaline coursing through him. He felt alive, a primal force of nature fueled by survival instincts. The second intruder ducked low, narrowly evading contact, and lunged toward Tom with a wild swing. Tom saw it coming, dodging just in time but feeling the rush of air graze past him. He steadied himself, gripping the crowbar tighter, fighting to maintain control amidst the chaotic whirlwind. He shouted, voice heavy with the weight of every hard-fought day he had spent tilling the soil, planting seeds, and dreaming of a better tomorrow. These intruders were not just trespassers. They were a direct threat to everything he had worked for. With renewed determination, Tom swung the crowbar again, an arc of defiance that barely missed the second intruder, who stumbled back. The third, watching from the doorway, hesitated at the sight of his fallen comrade. Tom took that moment to advance. He bellowed, charging toward the door, each step fueled by the conviction that had kept him steadfast through storms and droughts. The third intruder turned to flee, but Tom was on him like a hawk swooping in for its prey. The crowbar connected once more, sending the intruder sprawling to the ground, crashing down amidst splintered wood and debris from the threshold. The house reverberated with the sounds of struggle as the last remaining figure scrambled backward, panic in their eyes. Tom stood over them, the crowbar held high, breath heaving as the adrenaline began to ebb. His house was quiet again, but the tension lingered in the air, thick enough to carve out. In that moment of silence, marked by heavy breathing and shuddering bodies, Tom felt the weight of the world shift. This was more than just a physical confrontation. It was a testament to resilience, the spirit to fight against the odds stacked high. The figure at his feet looked up, fear overtaken by the realization that they had underestimated him. "Please, we didn't mean any harm," they pleaded, voice trembling. But Tom wasn't just going to let this moment pass by without addressing the integrity of his home. "You shouldn't have come here," he replied, his voice steady, empowered by the knowledge that he had triumphed. With that, the intruder scrambled to their feet, their resolve broken. The remaining two, beaten down and reeling, stumbled out the door, shadows slinking back into the night like phantoms. Tom stood there for a moment, panting, the tension in his body slowly unraveling. The silence that followed felt both heavy and liberating. He had defended more than just walls. He had preserved the spirit of his family and the legacy of those who had come before him. His heart, still racing, began to slow as thoughts of what could have happened flooded in. He moved to the door, locking it tightly, ensuring stability in the aftermath of chaos. Outside, the moon shone brightly, casting a glow over the fields, but the peace was now tinged with a sense of vigilance. Tom returned to the kitchen, where the remnants of the struggle lay scattered. Broken chairs, scattered papers, the tip of the crowbar stained with dirt and sweat. The remnants of the fight reminded him of the stakes at hand. He gathered his breath, mentally sifting through everything that had happened. As night fell deeper, Tom knew he would have to address not only the physical damages but the lingering anxiety that crept in like unwelcome guests. It wasn't just about preserving the structure of his home. It was about reclaiming a sense of safety and serenity. He retrieved his phone and called a neighbor, John, who lived a few miles down the road. "John, I need some help. We had some trouble tonight," he said, voice steady. The alarm in John's voice rang clear. "I'll be there in 10, he replied, urgency palpable. Tom hung up, the weight of vulnerability pushing back against his resolve. Minutes felt like hours as he waited, heart still thundering in his chest. Uncertainty nested like a storm cloud on the horizon, but just as fear settled within him, John pulled up. The sound of gravel crunching beneath tires brought a sense of relief, the assurance that he wasn't alone. John called, rushing up the porch steps, eyes scanning the chaotic room. "I fought them off," Tom replied, lifting his chin. The look of shock on John's face did not escape his notice. John leaned back against the doorframe, processing the chaos within. Tom shook his head, figuring the intruders would be long gone by now. "No, I want to handle this myself." Together they surveyed the room, strategizing on how to reinforce the farm. Tom felt empowered by John's presence, a reminder that community meant strength in numbers. They moved methodically, cleaning up debris while plotting enhancements to the security of the farm. Even as they worked, Tom's eyes occasionally drifted outside, scanning the fields. Each rustle of leaves felt like a reminder of the lingering threat. Yet, the spark of resilience within him flared brighter. The darkness of the night amplified the defiance he felt. It was as if the universe had sent a challenge, one he refused to back down from. "Let's put some lights up outside, maybe get a security system," Tom suggested, the gears in his mind shifting into high gear. As the night turned into day, they worked tirelessly, reinforcing the old farmhouse with every ounce of determination they could muster. Each fix, each improvement, felt like reclaiming not just the structure itself, but the sense of safety that had momentarily slipped through his fingers. By morning, Tom stood outside, watching the sunrise break through the horizon. The warm light illuminated the fields, painting them in golden hues. Despite the lingering shadows of last night's terror, he felt renewed, an unwavering resolve coursing through him. He thought of his father who had tended this land before him and his father before that. The legacy of hard work, unwavering pride, and boundless love was woven into every blade of grass, every ear of corn. They had faced storms far worse, and yet they stood tall. Tom turned to John, who was wrapping up some repairs on the door. "I can't thank you enough for being here," he said, voice filled with sincerity. John shrugged, a smile creeping into his features. "That's what neighbors are for." With every passing day, Tom realized that the fight wasn't just about physical protection. It was about fostering a sense of community, of camaraderie that teamed up against threats, both real and imagined. The simple yet profound act of coming together gave him strength. As time went on, signs of healing emerged around the farm. Days turned to weeks, and with the seasons he nurtured new crops and smiles, cherishing the resilience they brought. The past no longer haunted him. It became part of the rich tapestry that defined his life. The whispers of that night became stories of strength, serving as cautionary tales that were reshaped into lessons from the earth stories to be shared around campfires, tales that echoed in the hearts of neighbors, inviting unity against adversity. In the stillness of a summer evening, as the sun dipped low and the fireflies began their dance, Tom sat on the porch, the gentle hum of cicadas serenading him. John wandered over, settling into a chair beside him, enjoying the peace that had returned. "You know," Tom began, looking out at the fields, "I never thought I would see my home like that." John chuckled softly. "And what's worth defending is everything," Tom replied, breathing in the cool night air. He looked out over his beloved land, fertile, untouched, a testament to life, resilience, and community. He knew the intruders were just fleeting shadows, a stark reminder that light is most beautiful when it breaks through the dark. Safety had returned to his home, but what had blossomed in its place was something more profound. A spirit of courage led not just by one man, but by a community standing strong together. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the fields when Caleb first sensed something was off. He had always trusted his gut. Years of working the land had sharpened his instincts to know when a storm was brewing, to feel the soil's temperature, and even to sense when danger lurked just beyond the horizon. Today, though, it was different. A feeling prickled at the nape of his neck as he wiped the sweat from his brow. Looming over the wide expanse of his family farm, the old barn offered a familiar comfort. It stood sturdy, its faded red paint peeling but still holding strong, much like Caleb himself. This was his land, the land his grandfather had tilled and his father had tended. But something about the quiet afternoon unnerved him. Caleb squinted, scanning the perimeter of the property. Nothing seemed out of place, yet it was that subtle shift in the air that made him uneasy. The familiar sounds of nature, crickets chirping and the rustle of leaves, felt muted, as if the world was holding its breath. Pushing aside the thought, he turned his attention back to the rows of corn, their tall stalks swaying gently in the breeze. But that unease lingered, gnawing at him like an itch he couldn't scratch. He set down his tools, feeling the weight of the day settle in his bones. Just as he was about to step into the barn for a moment's respite, the unmistakable sound of crunching gravel reached his ears, a noise that sent a shiver down his spine. Caleb's heart sank. He stiffened, straining to listen. There it was again, distinct and urgent. Someone was approaching, and not with friendly intentions. His instincts screamed at him to act. He hurried into the barn, darkness enveloping him as he stepped into the musty air. He knew he had to prepare quickly. His eyes darted around the interior, searching for anything he could use as a weapon. In the corner leaned a sturdy pitchfork, the metallic sheen catching the faint light. He grabbed it tightly, feeling its weight and knowing that this simple tool would now double as his shield and sword. The air felt charged, anticipation crackling like static, as the sound of footsteps grew louder and more insistent. He moved silently to a small window that overlooked the path leading to his home, careful to remain concealed in the shadows of the barn. Caleb held his breath, desperately trying to quiet the pounding of his heart. The figures came into view, 3 of them, clad in dark clothing. They approached with an unsettling confidence, eyes scanning the farmhouse as old instincts kicked in. These were no ordinary visitors. He recognized them instantly, intruders. As they came closer, he could distinguish their features under the low light, unease twisting in his gut. The feeling that had been nagging at him all day was suddenly crystal clear. Their intentions were dark, their body language aggressive. "Let's just get in and out," the leader growled, his voice a low whisper laced with impatience. Caleb could see the other 2 nodding vigorously, eyes darting to the house like vultures circling potential prey. Caleb's anger flared. He was done being hunted. This was his land, earned through sweat, toil, and grit. He felt the familiar rush of adrenaline surge through him, igniting a spark of courage deep within. He glanced down at the pitchfork in his hand. It wouldn't just be a tool today, it would be a message. With no time to waste, he swung the barn door open just wide enough to slip through unnoticed. The figures were now preoccupied with their plan to break into his home. Caleb's heart pounded as he crept closer, adrenaline heightening his senses. He could hear their hushed voices, the sounds of zippers being pulled down, bags rustling. Caleb forged ahead silently, positioning himself in the shadows, the cold steel of the pitchfork a steady comfort in his grip. He watched as the first man kicked the door hard enough for it to shudder on its hinges. The wood creaked as it surrendered to the burden of intrusion. Time stretched as he lingered in that moment of clarity. He recalled stories passed down from his father and grandfather, tales of standing firm against those who would threaten what was rightfully theirs. They had faced storms, droughts, and hardships. They had endured, and so would he. As the door swung open, a rush of anticipation filled him. He was ready. Caleb's voice rang out, startling the intruders. He stepped forward, pitchfork raised, eyes blazing with determination. The leader turned, eyes widening in shock before he quickly composed himself. But before he could finish, Caleb charged, driving the pitchfork forward. The metal glided through the air, a swift show of force. He aimed to intimidate, to send a clear message. The lead intruder dodged just in time, but the second one stumbled back, fear setting in. The leader shouted, scrambling to regain control as confusion erupted among them. Caleb didn't wait for an invitation. He swung the pitchfork again, this time aiming it at the intruder who had regained his footing. The pitchfork struck the wooden floor, missing but serving as a hard reminder of his resolve. The intruders reeled, uncertainty flashing in their eyes as they weighed their options. Caleb felt a rush of power, a primal satisfaction boiling in his veins. They weren't prepared for someone to fight back. They were used to taking, not facing the fierce spirit of someone dedicated to protecting what mattered most. One of them shouted, starting to retreat. "Shut up!" The leader yelled, fear creeping into his voice. And just like that, the tables were turning. Caleb pressed forward, adrenaline coursing through every vein in his body. This wasn't just about fear or anger. It was about reclaiming his sense of safety, his sense of home. He felt fearless, alive in a way he hadn't in years. With one swift move, he jabbed the pitchfork toward the leader, barely missing his leg. The command boomed, echoing off the barn walls like thunder. The intruders hesitated again, but there was no way out now. One of them whimpered, voice tinged with desperation. "Let's just leave." Caleb roared back, eyes blazing. As the gravity of his words hung in the air, the intruders finally made a decision. They turned to flee, crashing into each other in their rush to escape, stumbling back toward the door. Caleb moved quickly, shoving his weight against the doorframe and blocking their exit. It wasn't over yet. No more chances. The pitchfork hovered threateningly in front of him, a determination he had never known surging through his veins. He shouted again, voice rising above the chaos. The fear in their eyes was palpable, and it filled him with a fierce sense of satisfaction. They had taken the wrong path, and now they were facing the consequences. The leader tried to shove past him, but Caleb positioned the pitchfork just right. He bellowed, a bluff but one that conveyed his resolve. The leader growled, retreating into the darkening outdoors, retreating like a wounded animal. With a final scream of frustration, all three intruders bolted into the night, shadows disappearing into the thick darkness of the trees. Caleb stood there, panting heavily, the pitchfork still ready, the adrenaline slowly subsiding into disbelief. He had defended his home, stood his ground, and won. The feeling washed over him, a wave of pride and relief intertwining. But just as the victory began to settle, the reality of what had happened hit him. His heart raced not just from the adrenaline but from the gravity of the moment. He let the pitchfork drop to the barn floor, feeling the weight of it lost in the moment. The cool night air rushed in as he leaned against the wall, breathless, reality flooding back in. Thoughts of what could have happened began to creep in like an unfurling vine. The stillness that followed felt intoxicating. The frantic beating of his heart began to slow, and he took a moment to soak in the fragility of the night. A few minutes passed before Caleb felt the steady presence of his neighbor, Tom, who had heard the commotion and rushed over. He shouted, knocking on the barn door. Caleb called back, voice slightly shaky. He opened the door to find Tom's concerned face staring back at him. Caleb retrieved the pitchfork and nodded toward the open door. They tried to break in, three of them. Tom's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in determination. He stepped inside. The scent of the barn mixed with the lingering adrenaline in the air was almost palpable. "No, I'm fine," Caleb insisted, running a hand through his hair. "I fought them off right here. Thank God." Tom's voice held urgency, the weight of the world seeming to settle over them. Caleb shook his head, still grappling with the adrenaline beating in his chest. "I don't want to," he interrupted, fierce resolve shining through. "I won, they didn't take anything." Tom paused. "It's not just about tonight." "They will think twice," Caleb replied, defending his choice with each word. He took a deep breath, holding firm to his convictions. "I won't live in fear." The two men stood in the barn, the silence punctuated only by their heavy breathing, and it was then, in that quiet camaraderie, that Caleb felt a wave of strength wash over him. It wasn't just a matter of defending a piece of land. It was about standing strong for the lives they had built, for the values they held dear. The night wore on, and as darkness melded into lilac dawn, the two friends moved through the farm, fixing broken shutters and securing loose windows, reinforcing the home that had weathered more than just the threat of intruders. Days turned into weeks, cultivating new crops, preserving the memory of the struggle while sowing seeds of strength. Life carried on, and the scars of that night turned into stories of resilience, woven into the fabric of their daily lives. Neighbors gathered, sharing tales of their own struggles and victories, reinforcing the bonds that made their community strong. Caleb became not just a farmer, but a symbol of courage, a steadfast warrior for those who faced adversity, a reminder that standing your ground could send a powerful message. The fields flourished as the seasons rolled by, and each time he returned to the barn, the place where fears were confronted, Caleb felt that familiar spark within him. He knew he had the strength to face anything life threw his way, because sometimes the greatest battles are fought not in grand arenas, but at home, standing firm against the shadows that dare to intrude upon our lives. Caleb had proven that he wasn't just a farmer, he was the guardian of his land, ready to face whatever came next. And as he looked out at the golden expanse beneath the rising sun, he felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. Everything would be all right. The sun hung low, bathing the fields in a warm golden hue as dusk approached. It was a peaceful evening on the Carter family farm, with nothing but the chirping of crickets and the gentle rustle of leaves filling the air. Jack Carter, a seasoned farmer in his late 40s, wiped the sweat from his brow as he leaned against the weathered wooden fence that bordered his property. Years spent toiling in the fields had etched deep lines into his face, but they also carried stories, a legacy of hard work and perseverance. Tonight, however, something felt different. A heaviness lingered in the air, as if the day's tranquility was merely a facade hiding a tense undercurrent. Jack pushed aside the unsettling feeling, attributing it to fatigue. He had just spent the afternoon repairing one of the barn doors that had warped over time. But as he turned his gaze toward the distant tree line, unease twisted in his gut. Without warning, a sharp sound broke the stillness, a crunching of gravel that echoed in his ears. Jack squinted into the dimming light, alertness coursing through his veins. The driveway leading to his home was lonely this time of evening, and the sound was unmistakably human. Whoever was approaching didn't belong there. His heart raced as he scanned the surroundings. 3 shadowy figures emerged from the tree line, their movements deliberate but cloaked in the encroaching darkness. A cocktail of dread and determination mixed within him. They were intruders, and they were drawing near. "Not on my watch," he muttered under his breath, adrenaline surging. Jack had faced storms, droughts, and every challenge the earth could throw at a man, but this felt different. He stepped backward, heading toward the barn where he kept tools and supplies. Memories flashed through his mind of his father, a man who faced countless hardships without flinching. He was a protector, and Jack had learned well. He found a sturdy crowbar leaning against the wall, a heavy tool meant for prying and lifting, but right now, it would serve another purpose. He gripped it tightly, feeling the familiar cool metal against his palm. With the dim light of the setting sun casting long shadows, he slipped outside, positioning himself just around the corner of the barn, hidden from view. The intruders were now closer, their voices low and conspiratorial. "Just a few valuables and we can get out of here," one of them said, a hint of impatience in their tone. Jack's heart raced. He had worked hard for everything he owned. This was more than just a house and land. It was home filled with memories of laughter, love, and generations of effort. He wouldn't let anyone take that away. As the intruders approached the farmhouse, Jack inhaled deeply, steeling himself. He could hear them now, the sound of their footsteps crunching on the gravel, a punctuation mark of their intent. He could feel their energy, an unsettling mix of bravado and hesitance. These weren't seasoned thieves, they were desperate, and that made them dangerous. He tightened his grip on the crowbar as they reached the porch. Jack could make out their faces now, defined against the backdrop of the dusk. They looked young, but their eyes held a wild sort of ambition, the kind that fuels reckless decisions. "Let's move," one urged. The leader snapped. Jack's opportunity arose, he had to act, and fast. He stepped out from behind the barn, feeling a wave of power surge through him. The three intruders froze, surprise flooding their expressions. The leader turned, eyes narrowing, disbelief quickly morphing into arrogance. He sneered. "I want you to leave," Jack replied, voice steady, firm enough to cut through the tension in the air. He brandished the crowbar, holding it at the ready. For a brief moment, uncertainty flickered across their faces. Then, like a switch had been flipped, they surged forward, fueled by adrenaline and the toxic mix of bravado. Jack's instincts kicked in on instinct. He lunged forward. One of them shouted. Jack swung the crowbar, the heavy metal cutting through the air. He aimed for the ground just beside the leader's feet, striking the gravel with a resounding thunk that echoed in the stillness of the night like a thunderclap. The intended message was clear. He was not backing down. The leader stumbled back, eyes wide with shock. What the? Before he could finish, Jack swung again, catching the second intruder with a glancing blow, just enough to knock him off balance. The third, hesitating for just a split second, gave Jack the opportunity he needed to push them back further. Jack shouted, adrenaline coursing through him like wildfire. The truth was simple. He wasn't just a farmer, he was determined to protect everything he loved. The leader regained his footing, rage simmering beneath his bravado. "We're not leaving without what we came for." Just like that, the tides turned once again. Jack found himself facing three aggressors. Two of them were gaining their footing, and the leader was advancing with a fire in his eyes. But he had a home to protect, and he wasn't about to let fear guide his decisions. With fierce resolve, Jack swung the crowbar once more, narrowly missing the leader's shoulder. The whiz of metal through the air sent a shiver through his body, a mix of fear, exhilaration, and defiance. Jack roared, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The words echoed through the dusk, mingling with the rustling wind as shadows danced around them, as if nature itself was urging him on. The leader lunged again, and instincts kicked in. Jack sidestepped, feeling the rush of air as the boy passed him, nearly tumbling into the wall of the barn. He didn't hesitate. He struck again with the crowbar, a sweeping arc that connected with the second intruder just as he attempted to rise. The impact sent the young man crashing to the ground, groaning as he tried to regain his bearings. But the first was still charging toward him, fists raised, every ounce of determination and desperation clinging to his face. Jack felt a surge of fury. This wasn't just a fight, this was a barrier between them and everything he held dear. "Leave now," he warned, voice steady yet laced with intensity. The hesitation was palpable. The leader darted a look back at his companions, and in that brief moment of doubt, Jack pushed onward. That seemed to ignite something in them. The leader, fueled by anger, surged forward again, shouting incomprehensible threats. Jack felt a rush within him, a combination of fear and raw instinct. Dodging one blow, he pushed deeper into the confrontation, swinging the crowbar once more. But at that moment, the quiet night broke open into a cacophony of chaos. The sound of footsteps pounding against gravel drew Jack's attention. He was momentarily distracted, and in that instant the leader took advantage, tackling him to the ground. The breath was knocked from Jack's lungs. He grappled with the weight of the young man on top of him, fighting to regain control. The cold earth scraped against his skin, but he was fueled by a determination born of desperation. He couldn't afford to lose. The leader yelled, but Jack was refusing to yield. With a surge of adrenaline, he twisted beneath the weight, breaking free from the grapple. He pushed against the ground with all his might, snagging the crowbar in one swift motion. He shouted, feeling a surge of primal energy wash over him. He swung out, catching the leader with the edge of the crowbar. The impact was enough to stagger him, giving Jack precious seconds to get to his feet. Breathless and trembling but alive with resolve, Jack turned to face the remaining two intruders. They were watching him now, wide-eyed, fear creeping into their expressions. The course of the night had shifted dramatically, and a part of him felt powerful, invincible. "Get out of here while you still can," he warned, voice low but commanding. The three exchanged looks, uncertainty brimming on their faces. Jack stood poised, crowbar ready, the moonlight glinting off its surface like a blade. With their bravado slipping, one of them shook his head. "We're—" Jack shouted again, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. With that, the three turned tail and fled, dashing back toward the tree line, shadows swallowed by the night. Jack stood there, chest heaving, a mix of emotions flooding through him: relief, anger, triumph. He took a deep breath as the reality of the moment began to sink in. The world felt still around him, the chaos fading into the background as he regained his bearings. He had defended his home. He had fought back against intruders, against fear, against the very notion that he would allow anyone to take what was his. But the adrenaline quickly turned into disbelief. He had never imagined he would face such danger on his own land. Calming himself, he took a moment to assess the situation. Shadows tricked the eye in the fading light, and everything felt heightened, tense. Shivering, he leaned against the barn wall, still clutching the crowbar. Voice called out, breaking the tension. It was his neighbor Larry, coming toward him at a brisk pace, and relief flooded Jack's chest. "What happened?" "I had some unwanted visitors," Jack replied, shaking his head in disbelief. Larry exclaimed, glancing around the yard with concern. "I'm fine, just a little shaken. I didn't think they'd try to." Jack paused, the weight of it beginning to sink in. Larry stepped closer, giving him a supportive clap on the shoulder. "You handled it like a pro. It takes guts to stand your ground like that." Jack allowed himself a moment of pride amidst the chaos. "They didn't take anything," he said, shaking his head. "Let's get inside, check the place over," Larry suggested, leading the way. Jack nodded, grateful for the company. Inside the house, they went through the rooms, ensuring everything was intact. Mostly it was. The only reminders of the confrontation outside were the scattered tools and scattered memories tainted by a sudden sense of vulnerability. As the tension subsided, Jack couldn't help but replay the events over and over in his mind. The energy, the fear, the raw instinct to protect those he loved, it was visceral. Jack asked as they stood together in the kitchen, the stillness thickening around them. "Maybe," Larry replied thoughtfully. "But if they do, I bet they'll think twice after tonight." Jack chuckled softly, the noise a combination of relief and disbelief. This entire experience would become a part of his story. The stories he would share in years to come, tales of strength woven into the fabric of his family tradition. As they prepared to lock up for the night, Jack caught a glimpse of the moonlight streaming through the window, illuminating the kitchen. Tonight was a wake-up call, he mused. Larry nodded, smiling. "We'll keep each other safe, Jack." After locking the doors, Jack stepped onto the porch, taking in the night. The chill had settled, but in the depths of his heart, warmth lingered, a feeling of invincibility. He had faced shadows outside, but what lay within was even darker. Underneath that moonlight, he felt the weight of history, the voices that had come before, generations of farmers who had faced their own adversities and prevailed. He wouldn't just be the man who had fought off intruders. He would be the husband, the father, the protector of a legacy built on resilience. As he turned back inside, feeling the threshold between the world outside and the warmth within, he knew that whatever came next, he would stand ready. The night was quiet now, but its lessons echoed in his heart, louder than ever, a reminder that courage takes many forms, and sometimes it reveals itself when you least expect it. The shadows might come, but he would never back down again. The air was thick with tension as the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a canvas of deep purples and oranges. It was one of those tranquil evenings where the call of crickets filled the void, and David, a farmer with decades of hard work etched into his hands, leaned against the old fence that bordered his property. He gazed out over the sprawling fields he had tended for years, watching as the corn swayed gently in the breeze. What should have been a serene moment felt tainted by a growing sense of unease. For weeks now, something hadn't felt right. David couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him from the shadows, lurking just beyond the edges of his homestead. But tonight, that nagging sensation intensified, knotting in his stomach like a lead weight. As he took another look around, the peaceful stillness of the farmland split apart with a sudden, jarring sound, footsteps crunching on the gravel road leading to his house. David's heart quickened. He glanced toward the source of the noise, his instincts flaring. It was close to dusk, the twilight sky painted with colors too beautiful for the danger creeping closer to his home. 3 figures appeared, moving stealthily but with purpose. They were cloaked in darkness, yet the glint of moonlight danced off something metallic in their hands. A flash of panic ignited within David, but he quickly steeled himself, drawing on years of experience. This wasn't just his home. It was the heart of everything he had built, a sanctuary for his family and legacy. He gripped the fence post tightly, heart racing as the intruders grew nearer. Just too far to make out any details, he could see their faces were covered, hiding their intentions. David took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. The land had always taught him to be aware, and right now it was screaming for action. He spun around and hurried toward the barn where shadows loomed like sentinels. Within, he felt his pulse quicken as he stalked to the back corner, eyes scanning for anything he could use. A sturdy pitchfork caught his eye, leaning silently against a wall. He grabbed it, feeling its familiar weight, and made his way back outside, slipping into the shadows as the intruders edged closer. Peering out from the barn, he watched as they approached the front porch. Their voices were low, conspiratorial. "Let's just grab what we can and get out." The leader's voice dripped with arrogance, a dangerous edge underscoring each word. David felt his heart drop. This wasn't just a theft, it was an invasion of everything he held dear. He felt the adrenaline begin to course through him, fueling every instinct to protect his home. Years of hard work and dedication surged through his veins. He wouldn't let this happen, he couldn't. He shouted, stepping from the shadows and shifting into the light, pitchfork raised. His voice boomed across the yard, filled with authority and a fierce resolve. Startled, the intruders froze, faces turning toward him, expressions shifting from surprise to defiance. The leader's eyes narrowed, sarcasm dripping from his lips as he scoffed. "What are you going to do, old man?" David felt the weight of their laughter. They didn't understand who they were dealing with. He wasn't just a farmer, he was a guardian of every blade of grass, every ear of corn, and every cherished memory within these walls. His resolve hardened. "You better leave while you still can," he warned, posture steady, eyes locked onto the leader's gaze. The pitchfork pointed directly at them, a clear signal that he was ready to protect what was his. The leader moved forward hesitantly, fists clenched. "This is our chance to get something easy, man. It's just an old farmer," he dismissed, gesturing to his cronies as if to incite bravery. But David wouldn't retreat. He tightened his grip on the pitchfork, muscles taut and ready. In that moment, the air crackled like a storm on the horizon. Time stretched and the world around them faded, leaving just the 4 of them, intruders and defender. Then it happened. The leader lunged at him, fueled by the bravado of youth and desperation. David reacted instinctively, angling the pitchfork to the side. He sidestepped and swung, catching the leader off guard. Metal rang against flesh as the sharp end of the pitchfork struck the ground just inches away from the intruder's foot, sending him stumbling back. Before he could regain his balance, David followed through, swinging the pitchfork again with ferocity that belied his years. It struck the second intruder squarely in the side, forcing a surprised grunt from him as he fell to the ground, scrambling to escape. The leader shouted, panic taking hold of his voice. As the third intruder charged forward, David pivoted. The space around them shrank to a narrow focus. Every instinct flared. It was survival mode. He swung the pitchfork again, deflecting a blow aimed at his head. A rush of adrenaline coursed through him, the fight igniting a primal energy deep within. David roared, grounding himself against the porch railing, determination radiating off him like an electric current. But the leader wouldn't back down. He came at David again, fists flying, fueled by desperation. "You think you can take us?" With every swing of the pitchfork, David fought not just for himself but for his family, his home, everything he had ever known. He was the keeper of this land, protector against those who would invade it. The pitchfork became an extension of his will, powerful and unyielding. In a fierce exchange of blows, David landed another strike, this time catching the leader just as he lunged. The intruder stumbled, the wind knocked from his lungs. David seized the moment, charging forward, flinging the pitchfork again just as the third intruder dove for cover. With a final surge of energy, David faced the remaining two. Fear danced in their eyes now, and for a moment uncertainty flickered among them. They had underestimated him, and that realization sent shivers down their spines. He shouted, voice trembling with authority, a warning they could not ignore. The leader scrambled backward, gesturing wildly. "Forget it." He shot a panicked glance at his friend, who was still trying to catch his breath after hitting the ground. The second intruder urged, terror overtaking their aggression. And just like that, they turned and fled, darting back toward the trees, shadows racing into the safety of the night. David stood still, heart pounding, the reality of what had just transpired washing over him. He had defended his territory, confronted fear head-on, and won against the darkness that loomed. As the adrenaline began to fade, he felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. Breathing heavily, he surveyed the yard, the chaos left behind as shadows crawled away into the depths. The pitchfork hung loosely in his grip, a testament to both the fight and the resolve that had surged through him. But then a chilling realization crept in. They hadn't left empty-handed. They weren't just after valuables, they had come with intent, and now they knew his vulnerabilities. What if they came back? David moved quickly, rushing to lock the doors of his farmhouse, heart still racing. As he leaned against the sturdy frame, the weight of the encounter haunted him. What were they capable of? Would they return, vengeance in their hearts? He scanned the darkness around him, his fields bathed in shadows and moonlight, feeling the need to protect his home more than ever. The world outside felt different now, fraught with danger. The tranquility that had once been a comfort now felt foreign. Then, from the edge of the property, he heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Not heavy and thudding like those of the intruders, but light, hurried, moving quickly through the grass. David's heart dropped. Had they returned? The knot of anxiety tightened in David's stomach as he crept toward the nearest window, peering out into the murky darkness. Shadows shifted among the trees, and he could barely make out a figure darting toward the barn. Who was it? A friend? Another intruder? "Come on," David whispered, the dread clawing at him as he quickly grabbed the pitchfork again, moving toward the door. Every fiber of his being screamed for him to confront this new uncertainty, but fear held him back, whispering doubts into his mind. His feet moved forward, but his heart pounded louder. Would he be ready again? Would he have the strength to confront another threat? He gripped the pitchfork tight, stepping cautiously onto the porch, every instinct on high alert. With each step he felt a part of himself blend with the land, each heartbeat synchronizing with the pulse of the earth beneath his feet. He stepped into the dark, every shadow becoming a potential threat, uncertainty curling like smoke around him. And then he saw it, a figure stumbling from the trees, a silhouette barely illuminated by the moonlight. His breath caught in his throat as he squinted, trying to distinguish friend from foe in the fleeting light. David called out, his voice steady, but beneath it lay the tremors of fear. The figure turned, eyes wide, and in that moment, everything hung in the balance as the answer awaited. Was this the threat he had prepared to face once more, or a chance for his fears to dissipate? The answer lay just beyond the veil of night, and all he could do was wait, plunged into the unknown.